Cold air rested over the desert like a held breath. No wind. No birds. Only silence that felt older than memory. At the edge of a forgotten excavation site stood a single figure wrapped in a worn field jacket the color of dry earth. The stitched name on the chest had faded into threads that no longer formed clear letters. Most people who once spoke that name were gone. And the few who still remembered preferred silence over explanation. For years this person had followed stories that nobody else believed. Stories buried in library basements. Hidden inside broken maps folded too many times. Whispered in letters never meant to be opened again. Tonight those stories had led here. Half buried beneath slow-drifting sand waited a sealed stone entrance. No markings. No symbols. Nothing to prove that human hands had ever shaped it. Yet the ground surrounding it felt disturbed in a quiet, unnatural way. As if history itself had tried to push the place back into darkness and forget it completely. The figure lowered slowly to one knee. Hands trembling not from fear but from the weight of passing time. From the strange feeling that something inside this tomb had been waiting. Waiting for decades. Maybe centuries. Waiting for this exact moment. Far behind in the darkness, an aging truck ticked softly as its engine cooled after the long drive through empty land. That fading metal sound was the final voice of the modern world. Everything else belonged to the past. The search had not begun in a desert. It had started years earlier in a quiet American city where brick streets glowed under yellow streetlights and small diners stayed open through the night. Back then life followed a safe, predictable rhythm. Morning coffee. Long hours inside temperature-controlled archives. Evenings filled with ordinary conversations that left no lasting mark. Dust carried the smell of forgotten paper. Old photographs curled at the corners. History resting quietly on shelves where few people looked. It was a peaceful routine. Almost invisible. Until the envelope arrived. There was no return address. No stamp from any familiar place. Only a single folded sheet of paper inside. On that page appeared a rough hand-drawn sketch of a stone doorway standing alone in the desert. Beneath the drawing were 3 handwritten words pressed deep into the paper. Do not open. Most people would have laughed softly and thrown it away. Called it a strange joke. Forgotten it before the coffee turned cold. But something about the handwriting felt urgent. Almost desperate. Like the final message from someone who understood they would never have the chance to explain. Curiosity grew slowly at first. A quiet question that refused to disappear. Why send this to a stranger? Why draw a doorway hidden in sand? Why warn the future instead of the present? Days passed. Then weeks. The paper remained on the desk, impossible to ignore. Research began as a small distraction. Searching old maps. Reading travel journals. Looking for any place that matched the rough shape of the sketch. Nothing appeared. Still the search continued. Curiosity turned into obsession so gradually it was almost invisible. Work hours shortened. Sleep became shallow. Conversations faded into background noise. Friends stopped calling after invitations were declined too many times. Money once saved for comfort slowly disappeared into travel expenses and copper documents. Highways stretched across states under endless sky. Gas stations at midnight. Cheap motels filled with flickering light and distant traffic sounds. Every mile carried the same quiet question. What could be hidden so carefully that someone would beg the future not to find it? Years passed in fragments of movement and silence. Dead ends multiplied. Rumors collapsed into nothing. Maps promised answers, then delivered empty land. Hope thinned like water poured onto hot stone. Until a winter morning changed everything. The discovery happened inside a forgotten storage room belonging to a historical society preparing to close its doors forever. Shelves were being emptied. Records sealed into boxes. Memories sorted and labeled before disappearing into private collections. Most valuable documents were already gone. But one locked cabinet remained in the far corner covered in thick unmoving dust. No key. No label. No reason anyone could explain. Breaking it open felt like crossing an invisible line. A moment where curiosity becomes something heavier. The metal latch resisted. Then gave way with a dull sound that echoed softly through the empty room. Inside rested a leather-bound diary wrapped in dark red cloth faded by time. The air carried a dry, ancient smell as the cover opened carefully. Pages fragile. Edges darkened. Ink pale but still breathing under light. On the first page a date appeared clear despite the years. April 14, 1912. A date known across the world. A night remembered for tragedy on freezing water. But the words written beneath did not speak of oceans or ships or ice. They described a discovery beneath desert stone. A hidden tomb sealed long before modern history began recording names. The writer never revealed a full identity, only repeating initials appearing again and again like a shield against recognition. Each entry grew more urgent, more afraid. Symbols appeared that matched no known language. Warnings repeated in different forms. Descriptions of something buried deeper than the stone entrance. Then one final sentence written with shaking, uneven lines. If this diary is found, then the seal has failed and history will change. After that sentence, the remaining pages were empty. No explanation. No farewell. Only silence pressed between paper. From that moment forward, turning back became impossible. Flights were booked without hesitation. Equipment purchased with the last remaining savings. Every connection followed. Every rumor tested. Every doubt ignored. Weeks passed beneath a sun that felt unmoving in the sky. Guides lost patience and left. Supplies ran low more than once. Loneliness settled like dust on skin. Still the search continued. Because the diary felt real in a way fiction never could. Too detailed to be imagined. Too frightened to be false. Then one evening, as the sun lowered behind distant stone hills, a pattern revealed itself in the sand. Lines too straight for nature. Angles too precise. An outline waiting quietly for human eyes. Excavation began with bare hands before tools were even unpacked. Every grain of sand lifted slowly, carefully, as if the ground itself might shatter under truth. Hours moved without sound except for breathing and shifting earth, until stone emerged beneath the final layer. Smooth, cold, untouched. The doorway from the century-old sketch. Perfect in shape. Impossible to deny. Proof that the diary writer had truly stood in this same place. Proof that the warning had been real. Night arrived quickly after the discovery. Stars spreading wide across the sky like silent witnesses. Common sense suggested waiting for morning. Gathering help. Preparing for what might be inside. But curiosity speaks louder than caution when answers feel close enough to touch. And now the figure knelt before the sealed entrance, tracing careful fingers across stone that had not felt human contact for longer than memory. No carvings. No handle. Only a thin silent seam where the door met its frame. A perfect seal. Whatever rested beyond had been meant to remain hidden forever. Memories of the diary returned again. The frantic writing. The unfinished story. The final warning. History will change. The desert remained silent as if listening. A metal tool lifted slowly, catching faint starlight along its edge. One movement could open the tomb. Reveal truth buried longer than any nation. Or release something never meant to return. Breathing slowed. Heart beat louder than the windless night. Time felt suspended between past and future. The tool pressed gently into the narrow seam. Pressure built. A low distant sound rose from within the stone like thunder trapped underground. Sand shifted. Dust fell in soft, quiet streams. The ancient seal began to break. And somewhere far beyond the desert, beyond cities, highways, diners, and ordinary sleeping homes, the world continued unaware. Unaware that beneath silent stone a forgotten diary had guided someone to a door capable of rewriting everything believed about history. The opening widened slightly. Darkness waiting on the other side, deeper than shadow. No sound emerged. No movement. Only stillness. The tool paused for a single fragile moment. Because one final question refused to fade. Why would someone risk everything to hide this place? And why warn the future never to open it? The answer waited just beyond the stone. And once the door moved completely, nothing in the world would ever remain the same. The opening in the stone was narrow at first, just enough for cold air to escape from the darkness below. That air felt different from the desert night. Older. drier, untouched by the passing of centuries. The figure remained still for a long moment, listening, not for sound, but for change. Sometimes silence itself carries meaning, and this silence felt watchful, as if the space beyond the doorway had awakened after a very long sleep. Slow, careful pressure widened the gap another inch. Grains of sand slipped downward into blackness without ever making a sound of landing. No echo returned. No sign of depth. Only endless dark. A small lantern was lifted from the ground nearby. Its soft glow pushed gently against the night without fully breaking it. For years this moment had existed only in imagination. A question repeated during sleepless hours. A doorway drawn on a single sheet of paper. A warning written by a stranger long gone. Now imagination had become reality. The lantern moved forward. Light entering the tomb for the first time in more than a century. Stone walls appeared slowly from the darkness. Smooth in some places. Rough in others. Carved not with decoration but with intention. This was not a place built to honor the dead. It felt constructed to hide something from the living. A narrow staircase descended into the earth. Each step worn slightly at the center. Proof that someone had walked here long ago. But no footprints marked the dust now. Nothing had entered or left since the seal was closed. Breathing grew slower. More careful. Every movement carried weight. Because discovery and danger often arrive together. The first step downward felt heavier than expected. As if crossing an invisible boundary between present and past. Above remained the open desert sky. Below waited a story unfinished for generations. Step by step the descent continued. Lantern light trembling softly against stone. Memories returned with each movement downward. Not memories of the tomb, but of the long road that led here. Endless highways stretching across open land. Radio voices fading between distant stations. Rain against motel windows in unfamiliar towns. There had been moments of doubt. Moments when the diary felt like a cruel illusion. One night years earlier the search had nearly ended inside a roadside diner glowing beneath tired neon. Coffee had grown cold while bills and maps covered the table. A quiet thought had formed then. Walk away. Forget the letter. Return to ordinary life. The future would have been simple. Safe. Predictable. But safety has a strange emptiness once someone has seen the edge of mystery. So the search continued. One more mile. Then another. Until miles became years. Now every sacrifice stood behind in silence while the staircase stretched deeper underground. Halfway down the air changed again. Cooler. Carrying a faint scent like dry metal and ancient dust. The lantern revealed markings along the walls. Not pictures. Not words in any known language. Lines curved into shapes that almost formed patterns. Then stopped just before meaning could be understood. They felt deliberate, but not meant to be read easily. The diary had described symbols like these, drawn in shaking ink beside hurried notes. The writer had believed the markings were older than recorded civilization, older than the first cities built beside rivers, older even than the oldest ruins studied by historians. At the time that claim sounded impossible, almost delusional. But standing here now, tracing light across the same unknown shapes, impossible no longer felt impossible. It felt real. The staircase ended sooner than expected, opening into a narrow stone corridor stretching forward into darkness. The ceiling was low, forcing slow, careful steps. Dust covered the floor in an unbroken layer. No disturbance. No sign of movement. This place had remained sealed exactly as intended. The lantern glow reached only a short distance ahead. Beyond that waited shadow thick as smoke. Each step forward felt louder than it should. Boots brushing dust. Breath echoing softly against stone. Yet beneath those small sounds lived something deeper. A tension difficult to name. Like standing inside a memory that did not belong to the present world. The corridor turned slightly. Then opened into a circular chamber. The lantern light expanded outward, revealing walls rising high into darkness above. The air here felt heavier. Still untouched. Still waiting. At the center of the chamber stood a stone structure shaped like a table or altar. Smooth surface, sharp edges, no decoration. And resting on that surface lay an object wrapped in cloth the color of deep earth. For a long moment the figure did not move closer, because instinct whispered something quiet but clear. This was the reason the tomb existed. The reason the diary writer had been afraid. The reason history had tried to forget. Every step toward the altar felt slower than the last, as if the air itself resisted. Memories of the final diary page returned again. If this diary is found, then the seal has failed and history will change. Hands tightened slightly around the lantern handle. Change can mean discovery, but it can also mean loss. Standing beside the altar now, the wrapped object remained perfectly still beneath its covering. Dust rested on the cloth in an unbroken layer, proof that no human hand had touched it since the tomb was sealed. The lantern was placed gently on the stone floor, light rising upward across the chamber walls. For the first time, true silence filled the space completely. No wind, no distant engine, no sound from the modern world above, only breath, and the quiet presence of something waiting to be seen. Fingers reached slowly toward the cloth, then stopped just before contact, because another memory surfaced, one nearly forgotten. Inside the diary, between frantic descriptions and unfinished thoughts, there had been a single line written smaller than the rest. Not a warning, not an explanation, a question. Whoever opens this must decide if truth is worth the cost. At the time those words felt dramatic, almost poetic. Now they felt heavy with meaning. Truth changes things, sometimes gently, sometimes all at once. The world above continued sleeping peacefully, unaware of the decision forming deep beneath desert stone. Slowly the cloth was lifted. Dust slipped away in soft silent streams, revealing dark polished material beneath. Not gold, not silver, something older, something unfamiliar. The shape resembled a book, but thicker, heavier, bound in a surface smooth as still water. No title marked the cover, no symbols, nothing to explain what it contained. Only silence. The heartbeat grew louder again, not from fear, but from recognition, because the diary had mentioned this too. A record hidden inside the tomb, a truth never meant for history to find. Hands hovered above the object without touching it. Opening the tomb had been one choice. Opening this might be another far greater. Questions filled the quiet chamber. Who created it? What truth could change history? Why hide knowledge instead of protecting it? And the most troubling question of all, what happened to the diary writer after discovering this place? The lantern flame flickered slightly, though no wind existed underground. Light shifting across the smooth dark surface of the hidden book. For a moment it almost looked as if the object itself breathed. Slow, patient, waiting. The chamber felt smaller suddenly. The silence heavier. Because deep down a realization had begun to form. Some secrets are buried to protect the future, not the past. And uncovering them may begin something impossible to stop. The hand finally touched the surface. Cold, perfectly smooth, unchanged by time. A faint sound echoed softly through the chamber. Not from the walls, but from inside the object itself. Like a distant page turning where no page should move. Breath caught in stillness. Because that sound meant only one thing. The story inside this tomb was not finished. It was waiting to continue. The sound did not repeat. For a few fragile seconds the chamber returned to complete stillness. Lantern light rested quietly on stone. Dust hung motionless in the air. Nothing moved. Yet the memory of that faint turning sound refused to fade. It had come from inside the dark object. Not from shifting rock. Not from echoing breath. From within. The hand remained resting on the smooth surface. Cold traveled slowly through the skin. Not painful. Just unfamiliar. Like touching something that did not belong to ordinary time. A quiet thought formed without invitation. This was never only a tomb. It was a container. A place designed to hold a moment still. Breathing became shallow, careful, as if even air might disturb whatever balance existed here. For years the search had been about discovery, about proving the diary true, about reaching this hidden chamber. But standing beside the stone altar now, discovery no longer felt like victory. It felt like responsibility. The lantern flame shifted again. A slow, gentle movement, though the underground air remained silent. Shadows stretched across the curved walls, then settled. The object waited. No lock, no visible seam, no clear way to open it. Yet the earlier sound suggested something inside was aware. Not alive in any human sense, but not empty either. Memories of the diary returned once more. Pages filled with careful observation at first, then rushed uneven lines. Ink pressed harder with each entry. Fear growing between the words. One passage had repeated in different forms across several pages. The truth inside is older than memory, older than language, older than the stories we tell about where we began. At the time those lines felt symbolic, the kind of dramatic language sometimes found in forgotten journals. Now they felt literal, because nothing in this chamber matched known history. No carvings of kings, no burial art, no offerings, only function. Hide, seal, wait. A second quieter realization followed. If this place had remained hidden for more than a century after the diary was written, then whoever sealed it had succeeded. Until tonight. The fingers moved slowly across the surface, searching for any imperfection, any edge, any sign of human design. Nothing. The material felt seamless, as if shaped rather than built. Another memory surfaced. One nearly overlooked detail from the diary. The writer had never described opening the object, only finding it, studying it, becoming afraid of it. And then the entry stopped. A question rose in the silence. Did the writer fail to open it, or choose not to? The difference mattered, because choice implies knowledge, and knowledge implies consequence. The lantern was lifted slightly. Light brought closer to the dark surface. For the first time faint lines appeared, so thin they had been invisible before, flowing across the cover like hairline fractures in ice. Not cracks, patterns. They curved toward the center, forming a shape almost like a spiral. But incomplete, interrupted. The moment light touched the very center, the faint turning sound came again. Softer than breath, yet unmistakable. The hand pulled back instinctively. Heart beating faster now. The object had responded to light, or proximity, or touch. No way to know which. Silence returned, but it no longer felt empty. It felt aware. A deep tension settled in the chest. Not panic. Something heavier. The sense of standing at the edge of irreversible knowledge. Because opening this would not be like opening a door, or reading an old document. This felt closer to waking something that had been intentionally left asleep. Footsteps echoed faintly in memory. Not real footsteps. Just imagination recalling the long journey here. Highway miles under open sky. Gas stations glowing in the night. Rain against windshield glass. The quiet hope that the search would mean something. All of it had led to this single unmoving object in a silent underground room. The scale of that truth felt overwhelming. For the first time doubt returned fully. Not about the diary. Not about the tomb. About the decision to continue. Walking away was still possible. The entrance above remained open to the stars. The desert would erase footprints by morning. The world would remain unchanged. No one else needed to know. The thought lingered longer than expected, because part of the heart wanted that ending. A quiet return to ordinary life. Mystery left untouched. Future safe from whatever slept inside this chamber. But another feeling rose beside it. Stronger. Steadier. The same force that had carried the search across years of uncertainty. If truth exists, someone will eventually find it. And if that moment is inevitable, then hiding from it changes nothing. Breath filled slowly, then released. The decision formed without words. The hand reached forward again. This time not searching, not hesitating, accepting. Fingers rested once more at the center of the faint spiral pattern. Cold spread deeper than before. Up the arm, across the shoulder, into the chest. Not pain. Connection. The turning sound grew clearer. Still quiet, but steady now, like distant pages moving in slow rhythm. Light from the lantern dimmed slightly, though the flame itself had not changed. Instead, the darkness around the chamber felt thicker. Drawing closer. Listening. A soft vibration traveled through the stone altar. Barely noticeable, yet real. Dust shifted along the surface in delicate lines, following the spiral pattern beneath. The object was opening. Not with hinges. Not with visible movement. Something more subtle. More precise. The smooth surface at the center became almost transparent. Not fully clear. Just enough to reveal faint shapes beneath. Lines. Symbols. Movement like ink drifting through water. Breath caught again. Because those symbols matched nothing known. No ancient script. No mathematical form. No artistic design. Yet the mind reacted to them instantly, as if recognizing meaning without understanding language. Emotion rose unexpectedly. A deep quiet sorrow mixed with wonder. Like hearing a story remembered from before birth. Images formed at the edge of thought. Too fast to grasp completely. Vast sky without stars. Endless water without shore. Structures rising where no humans existed. Then gone. The surface darkened again. Symbols fading back into invisibility. The turning sound slowed. Then stopped. Silence returned once more. Heavier than before. The hand remained in place. Unmoving. Because something had changed. Not in the chamber. Inside. A realization difficult to explain in words. History was not only incomplete. It was edited. Pieces hidden. Moments erased. Truth folded away where time could not reach. And this object, whatever it truly was, held one of those missing pieces. The lantern flame flickered sharply, casting sudden long shadows across the chamber walls. For a brief instant the shadows did not match the objects creating them. They stretched in impossible directions, forming shapes like distant towers, or figures standing just beyond sight. Then the light steadied, and the walls were empty stone again. Breath trembled slightly now, because the near resolution had passed. The object had responded, revealed only a fragment, then closed again, like a question asked but not yet answered. Frustration mixed with awe, the feeling of standing inches from understanding, yet unable to reach it. The diary writer must have felt this same tension, this same unfinished pull. Perhaps that was why fear had grown in the final pages, not because of what was seen, but because of what remained hidden. Another thought followed slowly. What if the object does not open fully on its own? What if it requires something more? A choice, a cost, a sacrifice. The words from the diary returned again with quiet weight. Whoever opens this must decide if truth is worth the cost. The meaning felt clearer now, and far more dangerous, because cost implies loss, and loss cannot be undone. The chamber seemed colder suddenly, though the air had not changed. Time felt strange here, stretched, waiting. Somewhere above, morning would eventually reach the desert, sunlight touching the open doorway, the world continuing forward without knowing how close it stood to change. But down here, the moment remained suspended, near resolution, not yet complete. The object rested silently on the stone altar, dark, closed, patient, as if giving one final chance to walk away, because once fully opened, whatever truth waited inside would belong to the world, not just to the one who found it. And the world might not be ready. The hand slowly lifted from the surface. The turning sound did not return. Stillness settled again across the chamber. One final decision remained, closer than ever, heavier than anything before. To leave. and protect the present, or to continue and release the past. The lantern light trembled softly between those two futures. For a long unmoving moment nothing existed except breath and silence. The chamber no longer felt like empty stone beneath the earth. It felt like a pause in time itself, a single fragile space where the future waited for permission to begin. The lantern rested on the floor beside the altar, its glow steady yet somehow softer than before, as if even light understood the weight of what remained undecided. Walking away was still possible. That truth remained clear. The open doorway above would still lead back to cold desert air, back to highways and distant cities and ordinary mornings, back to a world that would never know how close it had come to change. A quiet life could still exist, one where the diary became nothing more than a secret memory, a story carried alone until the end of years. That path required only one simple action. Turn. Climb the stairs. Let the sand and silence hide everything again. The thought lingered with surprising strength, because peace lives inside unanswered questions, while truth often carries consequences no one can predict. Fingers tightened slowly at the side, not reaching forward, not retreating, balanced exactly between two futures. In that stillness another memory surfaced. Not from the diary, not from the long search, from childhood. A classroom filled with afternoon light, dust floating through sunbeams near tall windows. A teacher speaking gently about history, not as dates or battles, but as choices. Moments when someone decided to reveal something, or hide it, protect it, or ignore it. The teacher had said one quiet sentence that remained clear even now. The future is shaped most by the truths people are brave enough to face. At the time the words felt simple, almost ordinary. Standing inside this hidden chamber, they felt enormous. Because bravery is rarely loud. Sometimes it is only the refusal to turn away. Breath filled slowly, then released into the cold still air. The decision formed without drama, without sudden courage, only calm acceptance. The hand moved forward once more. This time there was no hesitation, no searching for signs, no waiting for certainty, only choice. Fingers rested again at the center of the faint spiral. Cold traveled instantly through skin and bone, deeper than before, reaching places inside that had no name. The turning sound returned, clearer now, steady, like pages of time itself beginning to move. Light from the lantern dimmed further, not fading, but bending, drawn gently toward the surface of the dark object. The spiral lines glowed faintly beneath the smooth material, soft silver against endless black. A vibration spread through the altar, through the stone floor, through the air. Not violent, not frightening, ancient. Dust lifted in slow drifting patterns, circling upward like silent breath released after centuries. The chamber walls seemed farther away, shadows stretching beyond their natural shape. Then the surface opened, not with sound, not with motion visible to the eye. One moment solid, the next moment deep as night sky. Inside was no book, no pages, no physical record, only light, soft at first, then widening, expanding without brightness, a glow that carried memory instead of color. Images flowed within it, not projected outward, seen directly inside the mind. Vast oceans before the first ships, endless forests untouched by roads, skies filled with unfamiliar stars, time moving backward beyond history, beyond language, beyond the beginning of human story. Structures appeared next, impossible in scale, rising from landscapes that no longer existed. Not cities, not monuments, something older, built for purpose rather than beauty. Figures moved among them, tall, silent, unfamiliar yet not entirely strange. Not gods, not humans, witnesses. A realization formed gently, without words. The past remembered by the world was only a fragment, a small surviving piece of something far older, Civilizations had risen before the first known ones. Lived. Disappeared. Left almost nothing behind. Not destroyed. Not lost by accident. Hidden. Protected from time. Protected from those not ready to understand. Emotion rose unexpectedly. Not fear. Not excitement. Grief. For stories erased. For lives forgotten. For truths buried so deeply that memory itself had nearly vanished. The images shifted. A group of those ancient witnesses stood inside a chamber much like this one, placing the dark object upon the stone altar, sealing the doorway, leaving no mark behind. One final feeling passed through the light before the vision began to fade. Hope. Not hope for themselves, but for the distant future. For a moment when someone would open the seal. Not for power. Not for glory. For understanding. The light softened. Images dissolving like mist in morning air. Silence returned slowly, layer by layer, until only the quiet chamber remained. The object on the altar was dark again. Closed. Still. Yet everything had changed. Breath trembled slightly. Not from weakness. From the weight of knowing. History was larger than anyone had imagined. And far more fragile. Some truths inspire. Others divide. Some heal. Others break the world apart. The question remained. What should be done with this truth? Revealing it would rewrite everything. Science. Belief. Identity. Nations might argue. People might fear. Certainty might collapse into confusion. But hiding it again would continue the silence. Continue the forgetting. Continue a future built on only half the story. Neither path felt easy. Neither felt safe. Time passed quietly in thought. Seconds or minutes impossible to measure. Finally another understanding arrived. Simple. Clear. Truth does not belong to the one who finds it. It belongs to everyone. Even when it is difficult. Even when it changes everything. The lantern flame steadied. Returning to its natural glow. The chamber felt smaller again. Stone walls close. Dust resting peacefully on the floor. Ordinary. Almost. Hands moved gently toward the object one final time. Not to open it again. Only to lift it. Surprisingly light. Warm now instead of cold. As if the long waiting had ended. Holding it did not feel like possession. It felt like responsibility accepted. The staircase above waited in darkness, leading back toward the surface. Toward morning. Toward the unaware world. Each step upward felt different from the descent. Heavier. Yet clearer. The air warmed gradually, carrying faint traces of desert wind. Then at last the open doorway appeared, framed by paling night sky. Dawn approached slowly across the horizon. Soft blue replacing black. For the first time in many years. The search was over. But the journey was not. Because answers create new beginnings. Not endings. Outside the desert stretched wide and silent. Unchanged in appearance. Yet no longer the same. Faraway cities would soon wake. Coffee brewing. Traffic forming. Ordinary lives continuing. None of them knowing that beneath ancient stone, history had just taken its first breath in thousands of years. The object rested quietly in steady hands. No glow now. No sound. Waiting for the next choice. Not whether to open it, but how to share it. The sun's first light touched the soft gold spreading across endless sand. A new day beginning for the world. And for the first time, the future felt wider than fear. Because forgotten stories had not been lost forever. They had only been waiting. For someone willing to listen. End of Part 4. Ask for Part 5 to complete the story. Pratt 5 World 1400. ACT 5 Aftermath and Reflection. Morning unfolded slowly across the desert. Light did not arrive all at once. It moved gently over the touching stone, touching silence, touching the long-hidden doorway now open to the sky. The world looked the same as it always had. Endless sand. Fading stars. a horizon stretching beyond sight. Yet nothing was truly the same, because knowledge once buried beneath centuries of darkness was now breathing in open air. The object rested quietly in steady hands. No glow, no sound, no visible sign of the vast memory sleeping inside it. Anyone passing by would have seen only an ordinary traveler standing beside an old excavation scar in the earth. Nothing more. Nothing strange. And that simple appearance carried a strange comfort. Truth powerful enough to reshape history did not arrive with thunder. It arrived in silence, waiting for careful choice. The old truck stood where it had been left, metal cool beneath the fading night. Dust gathered along the tires from unmoving hours. Opening the door felt like stepping between two different lives. One life belonged to the past. Years of searching, lonely highways, fading hope, questions without answers. The other life had no clear shape yet. Only responsibility. Only possibility. Only the quiet weight of what must come next. The engine started with a low tired sound, breaking the desert stillness for the first time since dawn began. For a moment the sound felt too loud, too modern, too ordinary for what had just happened beneath the earth. Yet ordinary sounds were part of the same world that now carried this hidden truth. The drive away from the tomb was slow, not because there was difficult, but because leaving felt larger than movement. In the rearview mirror the open desert remained unchanged, wind already beginning to smoother, erasing clear signs of digging, softening evidence that anything unusual had occurred. Soon they would look untouched again, just another stretch of forgotten land beneath endless sky. And that was good. Some discoveries need distance before they can be understood. Miles passed beneath quiet morning light, the sun rising higher, heat slowly replacing the cold breath of night. Thoughts moved just as slowly, careful, measured. Revealing the truth immediately would be easy. A phone call, a message, proof delivered into eager hands. The world loved sudden revelations, breaking news, shocking headlines, voices speaking before understanding had time to grow. But this truth felt different. Ancient civilizations hidden before recorded history. Memories protected across unimaginable time. Knowledge waiting not for fame, but for readiness. Rushing such truth into noise could break more than it healed. So the road continued forward without hurry. By midday, the desert gave way to long empty highways stretching toward distant towns. Gas stations, weathered signs, small diners waking into daily routine. Normal life continued everywhere. People laughing, arguing, planning futures, remembering pasts. None of them aware that the story of humanity was larger than anything written in books. That thought did not create distance from them. It created connection. Because the hidden past belonged to them too. To everyone. Across every nation and belief. Truth shared carefully could unite wonder instead of fear. Afternoon light turned warm and golden as the truck rolled into a quiet town resting beside the highway. Nothing remarkable. Just a place where travelers paused between long distances. Parking near a small diner felt natural. Almost familiar. Like returning to an earlier chapter of life. Inside, coffee steamed in simple cups. Soft conversation filled the air. Plates touched tables with gentle sound. Ordinary moments. Peaceful. Human. Sitting at the counter with the object resting unseen inside a worn bag felt surreal. As if two different worlds now existed in the same space. One world spoke about weather and work and family. The other carried memories older than language. Yet both were real. Both mattered. A cup of black coffee was placed quietly on the counter. Warmth rising in thin silent waves. Holding the cup brought an unexpected feeling. Not triumph. Not pride. Gratitude. For the long road. For the unanswered questions. For the courage that had not disappeared during years of doubt. And even gratitude for the unknown future still waiting ahead. Because meaning is not found only at the end of a journey. It is shaped by every taken to reach it. Evening approached slowly after the long day of driving. The sky deepening into soft colors beyond the town. A small roadside motel offered a place to rest. Simple room. Quiet walls. A window facing fading light. Placing the bag gently on the table carried more care than any fragile treasure. Because what rested inside was not valuable in the ordinary sense. It was important. There is a difference. Night returned gradually. Stars appearing one by one in the darkening sky. The same stars that had watched over the sealed tomb. The same stars seen by ancient eyes thousands of years before. Time felt different now. Not a straight line. More like a circle slowly turning. The object remained still on the table. Silent. Patient. Opening it again was possible. The light and visions might return. But there was no need tonight. Some truths must be carried quietly before they are spoken aloud. Sleep came slowly yet peacefully. Free from the restless searching of past years. Dreams were gentle. Filled with open landscapes. Endless sky. And distant structures standing in calm light without fear. Morning arrived clear and soft. A new day. Not just another step in the search, but the first step after it. The question ahead was no longer where to go, but how to share. Universities, historians, scientists, leaders, each would see the discovery through different eyes. Some with wonder, some with doubt, some with fear of change. Preparing for that moment would take time. Care, patience. Truth revealed wisely can guide humanity forward. Truth revealed carelessly can divide it. Standing beside the window watching sunlight touch the quiet town brought a final calm realization. The diary had not been a warning to stop the future. It had been a test. A question carried across generations. Would the one who finds this seek power? Or understanding? Control? Or connection? And the answer to that question would shape what happened next. The road ahead remained long. Uncertain. Without guarantees. But uncertainty no longer felt frightening. Because the past had already proven something important. Humanity had always been part of a story far greater than it understood. And still it continued forward. Learning. Changing. Growing. That meant the future could grow too. The bag was lifted once more. Not heavy. Not light. Balanced. Stepping outside into the bright morning carried a quiet sense of beginning rather than ending. Cars moved along the highway. People started ordinary days. Wind carried the simple sounds of life continuing. Somewhere far behind, beneath layers of sand and silence, an empty stone chamber rested once again in darkness. Its purpose complete. Not because the secret was gone, but because it had finally been found. And far ahead. Beyond this small town, beyond the horizon, beyond the years still waiting to unfold, human history was preparing to open a new chapter, not written in fear, not hidden in silence, but shared in wonder, because the greatest truths are not the ones buried forever. They are the ones that rise gently into light, when someone is finally ready to carry them home. The journey that began with a forgotten envelope had become something larger than a single life. It had become a bridge. Between past and future. Between memory and possibility. And as the traveler stepped onto the open road once more, sunlight wide across the world, one quiet thought remained. Some secrets are not meant to stay hidden. They are meant to wait. Until humanity is ready to understand who it has always been. The road stretched forward without end. And this time, the future was not a mystery to chase. It was a story ready to begin.